Hi, I'm Heather Reeds, and this is my Author.Illustrator poet study. Have you ever wondered who's the man behind Jumanji? You may recognize it as the storybook version in this, and then maybe you recognize it as this one, Jumanji, the major motion film with Robin Williams. Or maybe you thought, who's the person who wrote The Polar Express? You may be familiar with this version or this version, which is also a major motion film with Tom Hanks. The man behind both of those books and storylines is Chris Van Allsburg. Chris Van Allsburg was born in 1949 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm originally from Wisconsin, so just a hop and skip right on over. He moved around the Grand Rapids area, later using homes as the inspiration in some of his stories. So if you ever heard of Zathura with the house that takes off into space, he actually created that house based on one of the houses that he has lived in and the street that he used to live on. So a fun fact is that he wasn't originally interested in art. He rather would have taken a science or math course. But in high school, his grades were so good that a recruiter admitted him right on the spot to the University of Michigan. And he ended up taking that deal, and in 1972 he got his bachelor's degree and he worked in sculpting. So the deal was that he would be part of the architecture program at the University of Michigan. In 1975 he got his master's from the University of Rhode Island School of Design. So he's again he enjoyed sculpting and he continued it into his master's degree. Once he graduated, he sculpted, but when it became too cold to sculpt, he wanted to find an activity to do that wasn't just a hobby. And so he began to draw, and he would have images in his mind that he'd get inspired by, which on our next page, he was inspired by cognitive dissonance, which is two very realistic things but put into extraordinary circumstances, or when they put together they don't quite match and there's a story behind it. And even in his sculpting he loved this idea of things that just didn't quite belong where they were. So such as like a sailboat sailing not on the sea or water but up in the sky. So another fun fact is that he also did not think much about his drawing. He thought he was okay, but not very special. And it wasn't him that went to publishing. It was his wife that took his drawings into publishing companies, and the publishing companies wanted him to do it. And his one condition was that he would write his own stories for his illustrations. And he has. He wrote many. So his work, again, inspired by cognitive dissonance. He is both an author and an illustrator, so double whammy right there. Illustrations, he prefers charcoal and graphite drawings with realism merging into fantasy. Again, the cognitive dissonance, such as in Jumanji, the game that comes to life and it's set in the real world with all this fantasy going on of a game that sucks you into it. Okay, so his first book was The Garden of Abdul Gassazi, and he was awarded his very first published book with the Caldecott Honor. And then his next book was Jumanji, another huge one, and he won the Caldecott Medal. And this was, again, made into a major motion film. 3 other books have become major motion films, including Zathura and The Polar Express, and some other awards that he has gotten for his publication and his illustrations altogether and separately. He got the Boston Globe Horn Book Award, the Regina Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Children's Literature. Here is an overview of many of just his self-written and illustrated. He also illustrated for other authors and has written other stories, but these are both his self-written and illustrated for children. So you can see here we got Jumanji in 1981. You may be familiar with maybe The Stranger or maybe The Widow's Broom, but I'm not sure about you, but I wasn't too familiar with any of the other ones besides The Polar Express, Jumanji, and Zathura. Okay, and there's some illustrations of the covers there. Alright, so we won't have time for the full story, but I have selected The Polar Express to be my read aloud. And he wrote and illustrated this book himself, so this is one of his double books. The Polar Express. Some of you probably have already read this, as it is a classic, especially during Christmas time. One Christmas Eve many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound. A sound a friend had told me, but I'd never heard. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steams and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. So we have the little kid standing on his bed, looking out his window. Beautiful hand-drawn images. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest and then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and my robe and I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. All aboard! The conductor cried out. I ran up to him. Well, aren't you coming? Where? Why, the North Pole, of course. This is the Polar Express. I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. Van Allsburg got the idea for this book by coming across a train in a wooded forest himself, and it was stationary. And he envisioned himself coming upon this train with the snow falling down, but as a child. And then as the story grew, he had always wanted to hear the sound of Santa's bells ringing. So that's where the basis of the story comes from. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers white as snow. We drank hot cocoa, as thick and as rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Going towards that North Pole, find Santa. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for right now because I have 1 minute left. But for my interactive activity, I just want to quickly touch. For younger kids, I had counting and sorting gifts. So physical gifts, since children of younger ages need physical things to connect mathematical ideas. So they'll count and then sort the gifts based on color or size. And then I also had for older kids where they are exploring momentum, energy, and forces. So they will use the train and reenact the train scenes coming across ice and obstacles and hills. All right, thank you very much.